Welcome to the presentation of Wood Songs. Evan's here in the studio.
You want me to play the guitar?
Sure.
I mean, yeah. Can anybody hear me? Is that what's happening now?
Yeah. Everybody's coming in and organizing stuff. And hear you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Devin. I guess we're ready to begin. And I'd like to begin our session by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the ancestral homeland of the Nooksack and Lummi people, who have been the stewards of this land and water since time immemorial. Indigenous culture offers respect to the land, river, and ocean, with the understanding that everything is connected and related and alive. We also acknowledge the elders with respect to their collective and individual plights and achievements. Please consider the legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together today. Acknowledgement is a beginning that invites us to delve deeper, uncover truths, and inspire ongoing action. The intention is to build deeper relationships and grow together so all may prosper. So welcome and thanks for joining us tonight for Wood Songs with Devin Champlin. My name is Ann McAllen. I work on the Whatcom Reads programming and steering committees, and I'm also the adult programming coordinator of the Whatcom County Library System. So the presentation you're about to enjoy tonight is a part of Whatcom Reads, which is brought to you by all the academic and public libraries in Bellingham and Whatcom County and our community partner, Village Books. Whatcom Reads receives significant funding from the Friends of the Bellingham Public Library, the Whatcom County Library Foundation, and support from other local businesses and organizations. We're very grateful for our partners. This year's featured Whatcom Reads title is Greenwood by Michael Christie, and tonight's program with Devin is a part of this year's Whatcom Reads program. So I encourage you to check out the other upcoming events this year inspired by the themes in Greenwood. And don't miss the March 3rd to 5th presentations with the author Michael Christie, who will be coming to Whatcom County. Go to the website whatcomreads.org for more information.
All right, and before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping things to take care of. Firstly, if you have any questions during tonight's presentation, please put them in the Q&A and Devin will address them towards the end of the event. If you encounter any technical problems or other concerns, please message us with the chat function and we'll be happy to assist you. And lastly, before I introduce our presenter, I have one final request. If you could please fill out our program evaluation form, it would be of immense help. I'll paste the link in the chats now. We read every program evaluation and we use this feedback to improve Whatcom Reads and apply for future grants. Thank you in advance for letting us know what you think. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenter this evening, Devin Champlin. Devin is a luthier, an instrument builder, fixer. Devin started playing guitar when he was about 10 years old and first started tinkering with his own guitars and building homemade instruments shortly after high school. After a number of years of working in construction as a carpenter and doing woodwork on the side, Devin went through the instrument construction and repair program at Roberto Venn School of Luthery, graduating in the fall of 2006. He spent the winter of 2008 and 9 in Madison, Wisconsin, studying under the generous tutelage of Todd Cambio of Frauleini Guitars. In 2019, Devin opened a tiny one-man repair shop in Bellingham. His business never slowed down, and along with a crew, he moved the shop to its current location on State Street. He has built over 70 instruments to date and is highly dedicated to his craft, always learning, grateful, and excited for the work he gets to do. Please join me in welcoming Devin.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jonathan. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to hear me chat here. So yeah, I'm going to talk about instrument making. I'll give you a little background. Jonathan just kind of summed it up nicely, but yeah, I've been woodworking for a long time, doing carpentry, construction, stuff like that. Went to the Roberto Venn School of Luthery, which was really great. Learned a bunch of stuff there, and then built a few instruments there. That's down in Phoenix, Arizona. One of a few Luthery schools. And I'll just say now that the term luthier and Luthery, it kind of applies to just instrument makers and repair people for stringed instruments primarily. Oftentimes, like a violin repair person could be a luthier, a guitar maker could be a luthier, a guy who makes like electric heavy metal guitars could be a luthier, or just somebody who just repairs and sets up cellos or banjos could be a luthier. So depending on who you ask. So in my case, I'm a person who builds mostly acoustic guitars, and I fix pretty much most stringed instruments, but guitars is the primary thing. So anyhow, I went to this Luthery school and learned a bunch of stuff, got out of that, and kept doing carpentry work on the side, tinkering on my own stuff. Eventually I did find a great apprenticeship with the Frauleini Guitars, who Todd Cambio, if anybody's interested, check out Frauleini Guitars. He makes incredible stuff, super old time, really unique builder. He builds stuff all by hand, using I got a note here. Do I make ukuleles along with guitars? I don't. Not because I have anything against the ukulele, but I do fix ukuleles. But yeah, anyhow, dang. All right. I'm not going to read the comments too much because I'll get distracted. By the way, thanks everybody for having patience with me. I never do, rarely have ever done video chat stuff. So doing my best to be comfortable with the format. So thanks for bearing with me. On and on, kept building stuff. People started asking me to build stuff. And eventually I was able to quit my regular day job and just build guitars all the time. And, it's not a very lucrative business, but it's something that I love doing. And I kept just doing it. And always doing repair work. And for a number of years, I was just building custom guitars. I think I built probably on average about 12 guitars a year, maybe 10 guitars. People ask me that question often: how many guitars do you build a year? How long does it take you to make a guitar? I'll tell you about that in a bit, how long it takes. But on average, I was making about 10 a year or so. And then just making them custom for folks. And then, a couple of years ago, I decided to open up a storefront where I was just going to do mostly repair work, because repair is a great part of my business. For me, it's helpful for me to do different things than building. I get to see other instruments, other makers' instruments, factory instruments, really nice instruments, really not nice instruments, and everything in between. And I get to see what works, what doesn't work, and I just get my hands on all the different aspects of them. And so, as a builder, repair work is hugely helpful, and it's just fun just to do different stuff. Not to mention, it's a great way to get a more small but steady paycheck. So a lot of builders I know also do repair work, and that's sometimes kind of the bread and butter, as they say. So yeah, 2 years ago I opened up this repair shop, and it just kind of has grown into just a full-fledged sort of guitar shop where we have used guitars, vintage instruments, and some new stuff. I do have a few local builders instruments there as well. Got a couple. Yeah, it's kind of sweet. Different folks from the community have come in and brought their stuff in, so that's fun to have their stuff up. I don't actually sell my own guitars there at the shop, because I have just been building on a custom order, just custom basis to order. And at this point, I still have a lot of building to catch up on. So my screen just did something weird. All right. Anyhow, so yeah, so that's where I'm at right now. Most of my days are spent in the repair shop doing stuff there, and I'm working slowly at fulfilling my custom orders here in the shop. Right now, I am at the home workshop. You can see I got some nice wood ceilings, wood walls, and I'm surrounded by pieces of wood. Getting to the book, Greenwood, I was asked to do this talk because of I guess the main character. Full disclosure, I have not read the book yet, but it's on my shelf. I intend to. But yeah, I guess the main character builds an instrument as part of it, and as I was just told, he got really frustrated and ended up destroying it after. Maybe I shouldn't spoil anything for the story, so I won't say any more. But I can relate to that feeling of building something and wanting to destroy it. But anyway, they asked me to do a talk here about wood and guitar making. So here we are. I'm going to tell you a little bit just about what it takes to make a guitar. And the first step is we got to have a design in mind. You got to know what you want to make, ideally. And then once you kind of have the vision, the shape, the size, the things, you got to select your materials. You got to select the wood. With instrument making, there is this there's a lot of mystique and stuff built up around certain woods. People get really into Brazilian rosewood, Adirondack spruce, different types of woods that are coveted for various reasons. In the violin making world, it's European maple, European spruce. For guitars, rosewood and spruce, or mahogany, or these are like the traditional woods, or the conventional woods, the things that people have been building with for quite a while. And some of these woods, a lot of these woods are scarce, are potentially endangered, or just out, practically just gone. And a lot of it is old growth wood, and it's a real odd thing, as being somebody who I don't want to cut down trees. I don't want to harm anybody. So I don't, I don't like look at an old growth forest and think like, ooh, I could build all these guitars. I'm like, this is respect. I have respect for the trees and stuff. And so it's an interesting conundrum to be in a place of being a guitar builder who's using these precious woods, and caring about that, as many of us do. So myself, like a lot of other builders who I know, increasingly are using other types of woods other than some of those the harder to get, more troublesome precious woods out there. Instead, I like to use salvage stuff when I can. I use a lot of domestic woods. I use a lot of like walnut and spruce, cherry, oak, whatever I can that makes sense for it, you know. And I also have done some salvage stuff, recycled stuff. I've taken apart tables and other things and reclaimed stuff, made guitars entirely out of reclaimed materials before. The whole idea with an instrument, and when someone's getting a custom instrument, there's a big idea of finding a perfect tone, finding the sound. And so it's easy to get hung up on the idea of, well, if we don't use, you know, this old growth spruce and we don't use this rosewood or whatever it is for the instrument, is it still going to sound good? People ask me that type of thing all the time. Like, you know, well, how is oak going to sound on a guitar? And the answer is, I mean, it sounds great. And as an example, a couple of years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago or so, time has passed strangely. But anyhow, some time ago, a friend of mine gave me a set of Brazilian rosewood that he had in this stash. It was past. It's around. You know, people have it, and it's entirely legal and okay to use. It's just you can't really export anymore. So it's just whatever is here in the States is kind of what we have to work with. So this friend of mine gave me this set. He's another builder, and he said, I've got this Brazilian rosewood, and it's pretty small, and you build small guitars, so why don't you take it? He just gave it to me. You know, it's expensive stuff. So I got really excited, and right away I took that wood and I put it to work. And so I decided to make a parlor guitar. And right when I started into it, I decided I want to make another guitar that is that's the same exact guitar. For the top, I'm going to use the same spruce, the same type of thing. For the neck, I'm going to use the same type of wood. The bracing, the design, the weight, the flexibility, everything. I want to make as close to twin guitars, two guitars next to each other. But one of them is going to be with that Brazilian rosewood for the back and sides. And one of them was going to be with common white oak, just a very utilitarian sort of wood, what people, you know, often think of just building furniture or hardwood flooring or something out of. And not to say that oak guitars are unheard of. It's a thing, but not very common. Anyway, so I built this Brazilian rosewood guitar and this oak guitar, and they were essentially identical as far as, you know, everything else. I tried to match up as best as I could. So I had these two guitars and I finished them. The rosewood one I named Rosie, and the oak one I named Okie. And I took them around to different friends. I took them to a festival and just let people play them. A couple festivals actually, and just let people play them. And I would do these tests where I'd ask people, you know, like I'd have somebody sit with a chair turned around, and I'd play one, and I'd play the other one, and I'd ask them, which one do you think I'm playing? Which one sounds better? You know, is this one the rosewood one? Whatever, you know, stuff like that. And all the way through, it was like the results were completely inconclusive. You know, people would, you know, say, oh, that one sounds much better. It might be the oak guitar, or it might be the rosewood guitar. You know, and say, oh, that's definitely the oak guitar. I can tell, and it'd be the rosewood guitar, or whatever. You know, they did sound different. I'll say that they had different sounds. They sounded pretty dang similar, but they did have different sounds. And in the end, you know, it was just a great experiment to do that, and just to be like, kind of like, see, you know, it kind of doesn't matter. It matters as much as you want it to, and that's how I feel about it all. So anyway, I ended up selling both those guitars. Of course, the rosewood one I could sell for a lot more, just because of the wood attached to it, which is just such an odd thing, but there it is. So that's the story of Rosie and Okie. Okay, so getting into building guitars. So like I said, you got to select your wood. So in this case, I got a little pile of wood over here. So I'm going to show you. This is some rosewood here. This is Indian rosewood, which comes from India. And this is this stuff is considered to be more sustainable. I guess there's a lot of it. I don't know the entire history of it, but it's certainly it's not you know, Brazilian rosewood. We're talking about like the the rainforest in Brazil and the Amazon rainforest. It's like, the stuff that we don't want to be cut down. So anyway, this is Indian rosewood, just to see. It's really beautiful. And this is how I often get my pieces of wood. I get them kind of rough milled for guitar sets. So this is book matched. So it was one piece, and then they sliced it down the middle like this, open it up like a book. So you have these twin matching pieces. And I do the same thing with some spruce. I'll show you some spruce here. Here's some Sitka spruce, and I get this the same way, kind of rough milled, rough bandsaw stuff. And you split it open and you have this book match piece. So you start by joining those together. You get a nice joint until you can, hold it up to the light. You can't see any light. Glue them together. That's pretty universal with, violins, basses, guitars. Almost any stringed instrument has the two book match pieces together. None of this stuff is an absolute rule. There's exceptions to all of it, but generally speaking. So you glue those together, and then you carve out your shape. I'll show you kind of a piece that's in the process. So after I glued them together, then I just rough them out with the bandsaw. So you can see this has like these like matching stripes and stuff, because that's the book match piece, that line in the middle. And then kind of get it pretty thin. This is like pretty flexible. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got quite a very thin piece of wood. This stripe in the middle is a little piece of spruce that I glued on, and then it'll get little braces, all sorts of details. Like I said, it's not a comprehensive how-to course, just getting you the idea. So you do that for the top and back. You glue a bunch of braces on. When I say braces, I'm just talking about very thin pieces of spruce or mahogany or anything lightweight. And these get glued on. I'll show you an idea here. Here's a spruce top, or this will be a top. So depending on the bracing style, I'm going to glue these, let's say like 1, 2, 3, 4, like a ladder. That's a classic ladder brace style. Or there's an X brace style. Kind of have them glued on like this. And then once those are glued on, you carve them down till they're almost practically gone. You flex the top, you tap it, you listen to it, smell it, sing to it, whatever, until you say, okay, it's ready, it's done. And that's a done piece. Along the way, I'll cut out the sound hole before I do all the bracing and stuff. And then on the other side of that, you've got your sides. You have the sides of the guitar. Similarly, I use a fairly thin piece of wood. In this case, it'd be long strips. I don't have any right here in the other room, but pretend this was straight. And now I just took it and bent it. So what I do is I take it's just an iron, just like a metal pipe, basically, with a heating element inside. I get this wet, and I bend it over that iron. Again, this was a straight piece of wood, and you start bending and bending with the heat and the moisture and the steam. Just keep going. If it starts drying out, spray it with some more water and just keep going until you end up with something that looks like the side of the guitar that you want. And then I use these forms here. Now this is just it's like a stacked layer of plywood. I made this form. I've got a bunch of them for the different shapes of guitars that I build. So for this, this is actually not a side for this form, but you can get the idea. I'll bend this until this fits nicely into that form. And then once you get to that point, it's a real show and tell. You get both the sides in, and this is a turnbuckle, kind of a clamp, just pushing the sides in to kind of hold it steady. I glue these blocks in on the top and on the bottom. That's the heel block and the neck block. And then these little ribbed sort of pieces of wood here, it's what we call kerf lining. And basically that adds a little bit of rigidity to the sides, but then it's probably its main purpose is just to give some gluing surface to the top. So once you're going to glue the top to this, like, and make a box, it gives it something to glue onto other than that little thin piece of wood. And then you end up gluing up this box. You know, keep in mind this will already have the braces on it, and then you glue the back onto that, and then you have a box, and then you can pop it out of this form. Once you're at that point, you've got this, you know, guitar shaped kind of birdhouse. Basically, it's just a box. It sounds nice. It's really cool when they come out of the form. They're really resonant. You know, I play music in the shop all the time. Got radio going or whatever, and you know, you pull that box out, and just the music from the speakers, you can feel this thing. Just, you know, you can feel it vibrating. I mean, literally. You know, it's really cool. You know, ideally, I mean, if you did everything the way you wanted to do it, you get that, and then true up the sides. There's a lot of details. I don't have anything in construction in quite the right process to show you every bit of it along the way, but I can show you a guitar in pieces that's a project. This here is an old parlor guitar, and by parlor guitar I just mean it's a small body guitar. It's just kind of the name for these older style small body guitars. And this one here, so this would be like out of that form, you end up with this box like this. Now this has all this fancy purfling, that fancy wood marquetry around there. It's got binding here. It's got this rosette around the sound hole, binding inside the sound hole. And also it's got this notch here. So imagine it didn't have any of those details and it was just this plain wood looking box. The next thing would be to get all these details in there. It's a lot, you know, you got to route out a ledge, you got to bend all these little pieces of wood and line them up the way you want them. It can be as plain or as fancy as you're intending to do it, you know. And then once you get all that done, we'll actually skip over this dovetail for a second. You have this fancy looking box, keep in mind, with no finish on it yet, no varnish. And then you got to make a neck. All right, so the neck, I like to use walnut lately. Maple, mahogany is a good one. Classic. But usually I do a neck that's 2 pieces of wood glued up together, and I'll kind of show you what I mean. Let's see. All right, here's a couple pieces of, here's a couple neck blanks. So, well, for example, this is, you can see this, this 2 pieces of maple that are glued together at length, right? So I glue 2 pieces together like this. There's this long seam down the middle. And for me, that ends up, you know, getting curved out like this. So from the side, that kind of looks like roughly a guitar neck. And then the next step is routing out this dovetail. I hope I'm not getting too complicated. I don't know. I'll try and not ramble on too much about this stuff. But you route out this dovetail joint here, and you do a mating joint on the body. And that's this little notch, that little kind of little keyhole there. And when you get that all done, what you get is, you know, this will fit into this like that. You know, that's the idea. These don't go together, so it doesn't fit great, but that's, you get the idea of how that would fit. So that's how most guitar necks are joined to the body, by a dovetail like that, tapered dovetail. And it's just glue that holds it. There's many exceptions to that. There's a lot of guitar necks that are bolted on. There's mortise and tenons and all sorts of different designs. Violin family instruments have a similar but slightly different joint. And lots of different ways to do it. Anyway, so you have this rough piece of wood like this. You got to put a fingerboard on it, which is the part with the frets. This one here is another uncarved neck blank that is started. It's got this piece of ebony veneer glued onto the headstock here. And then, well, I don't know, I don't have any fingerboard blanks here, but you can imagine. You glue a piece of hardwood onto here, and then you carve it. Carve away. What I carve with is a spoke shave. This is a spoke shave here. So it's got this is the blade. It just protrudes a little bit. It's kind of like a hand plane, but you just use these two pieces and, just kind of go down like this until you get the shape you want. The spoke shave is probably my main roughing tool that I'll get the rough stuff out. And then these rasps and files and chisels, a lot of chisel work around this part, which becomes very small at the end. It's just that little kind of the little heel part. So this is an old neck that's off of that same old parlor guitar, and this is just as an example of what it might sort of look like after I'm done carving. Obviously it's not just going to have tuners magically on it, but so all that carving till you get to a shape that you like, and then ideally these fit together nicely and you have something that's really starting to look like a guitar now. All right, let's see. I made some notes so I didn't get too lost. Oh yeah, and then you just sand everything. You sand, make all the dust in the world, sand more and sand it until it looks really smooth. And then you stain it if you want to, any kind of color pigments onto it, and then finish, basically varnish. Or there's a lot of different ways people finish guitars. Myself, I like to use shellac. I like to use I make a spirit varnish. And how I do that is with shellac flakes. I make it myself. I'll show you. So this is shellac flakes. Shellac is a really cool thing. Let me see it. It's beautiful. This is it's basically tree sap that a certain type of beetle in India and that part of the world, they cover these trees that are filled with sap, and they sort of use the sap as part of their like nesting kind of process. And the beetle is like, it's a renewable thing. It's so cool. So like basically they kind of, I think, I'm not sure if they exactly eat it and kind of process it. They're kind of like bug straws that tree sap goes through. Let's just say that. So these bug straws straw through the sap, and then all this leftover sap that's covering these trees, folks gather that year after year, the same trees, and then they melt it down and cook it in these big flat sheets, and then they break it up. And this is the broken up stuff. This stuff is kind of filtered. You can get it different ways. I get my stuff from this guy who's an Indian guy who lives in California and imports shellac products. Super cool stuff. It's totally non-toxic, and it's like shellac on a lot of things in many products, including like candies and foods and stuff too. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. And then you got to mix it with something. And for me, I actually just use Everclear. You could use denatured alcohol, which is essentially grain alcohol that has a little bit of poison, a little bit of toxic stuff inside it that way you can't drink it. They sell it at the hardware store. But Everclear is nice because there is no toxins, nothing in it. So when I do that, I have Everclear, I have shellac. I do add certain resins and things, copal or mostly different types of tree or plant resins. So the alcohol is sort of the solvent, the carrier. All these resins dissolve into it. You wipe it across a piece of wood. Eventually the alcohol evaporates, and what you're left with is a really thin layer of all this stuff, the shellac and the resins that you lay out. And that's the premise of a lot of that type of varnish anyway. And it's so cool. That stuff is seriously like, when I'm working with shellac and my spirit varnish, as I call it, it's a joy. It smells good. And I've joked around with people that I could literally eat it or drink it. I don't, and I don't recommend that, but you could. And then let's see. So yeah, there's a whole process to that. I like to do a French polish, but you build up enough finish till you're satisfied with that. And then let's see, after that, well, then you could assemble the guitar. That's when at that point, that's when I glue the neck to the guitar. And then I got to do fret work. Got to hammer in the frets on the fretboard. I got all these inlays. If you're going to do little dots or you're going to do whatever, designs, inlay. Well, if I was going to do an inlay on headstock, I would have already done it at that point. But got to get your inlays and your things done like that. You got to make a bridge. Every guitar has a bridge, except for this one, it doesn't have one. But you got to make a bridge to go in that spot. That's where the strings tie on, and then details. And at about that point, you're about done, and you string it up, and you have a guitar. I do have a guitar here that is a few years old that belongs to somebody, but it's just at the shop right now. So I will show you that in a bit. That's what I was playing when folks were coming in. But before we get to that, well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about, gosh, time is just rolling on. This is awesome. Thanks for being with me while I ramble, folks. But yeah, I guess just talking a little bit about the idea of getting back to the wood and why the wood and stuff. I want to put across a few points. So on every guitar, you have the back, you have the sides, and you have the top. Often the top is referred to as a soundboard. And the reason why is this is where the strings tie onto the bridge. And sweet, someone said, I love the rambling. Thank you. But yeah, when you tie the strings onto the bridge, which is attached to the soundboard, you pluck that string, the string vibrates and makes a sound. That sound, in theory, transfers through the bridge and into the top, and the entire top moves and vibrates. You can't necessarily see it, but you can feel it, though. You can feel that, that rumble and that vibration. So to a lot of builders, myself included, the top is really the sort of the most important piece of the puzzle as far as creating the sound that you want to create in a guitar. So for most people, they do use spruce, and I use spruce a lot. I also use fir, cedar. I've used a couple other things. Port Orford cedar, which is kind of like a cypress. And you notice all these are conifers, or evergreen trees. And the reason for that is the wood from them. If you do any woodworking, you kind of recognize this, that type of wood tends to be very lightweight, and it's very strong. So it's you can take a piece of spruce that is really light and really flexible, but at the same time has a great amount of strength, especially if it's cut the right way. Again, all this stuff also relates to the way it's cut, the way it's sliced out of the log, but if you have the right cut of spruce and you brace it just the way you want and you flex it the way you want, you can get something that just sounds awesome. And at that point, it doesn't necessarily matter what this and this are. You just need a box, a chamber for that to vibrate and the air to move. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter at all, but I'm just saying you could really use, you could in theory use about anything as long as you had a good sounding top. And even for the top, you could make it out of whatever. There's people who make carbon fiber guitars, make them out of all sorts of things, pallet guitars. There's all sorts of examples of that stuff out there. Sometimes because they want to and they think it's a great idea, and sometimes just to prove a point of like that you can make a good sounding guitar out of anything. That said, there was a really well-known luthier, Antonio Torres, who's from the 1800s, a Spanish luthier, made classical Spanish guitars. And it's a well-known thing that he had made this guitar that was, the back and sides were made of paper mache. The top was this really nice piece of spruce and the back and sides were paper mache. And there's not really a record of what he said about it, so nobody knows exactly, but a lot of people kind of think that was one of those times where maybe it was something experimental, or maybe it was sort of to just to prove the point that a good piece of spruce or a well-made top can make an awesome sounding guitar, even if the back and sides are made of paper or whatever. So I tend to agree with that, not to take away from any of the mystique of all the different beautiful woods that I do get to use. And as far as the back and sides, I do put a lot of thought into them still. And when you're building when I'm building, I get obsessed with all the details. But anyway, that's the idea of the soundboard. Just like on a piano, piano has a big piece of spruce that all the strings attached to. And again, it's that idea that type of wood just has certain characteristics that can resonate and help to reproduce the sound of the string and amplify it. Well, those were a lot of my thoughts. I guess I might be getting to the point where I'm open if anybody has any questions about any of that stuff.
All right, yeah, there are a number of questions in the Q&A section, and if anyone wants to continue adding, if you have any questions, please just put them in Q&A and we can start on those now. First of all, do you work on any mountain dulcimers, or have you ever built any?
I've never built a mountain dulcimer, but yes, I have. I've worked on them. I've strung them up and set them up and done repair work on them. Yeah.
And a follow-up question to that as well. Do you by chance know of any mountain dulcimer teachers in the area? This person was asking, they've been trying to find one.
All right. Almost. But there just the other day at my shop, there was somebody who was she was an attendee of the Bellingham Folk Festival, which happened just this past weekend, and she said that she was going to be teaching mountain dulcimer. I think she said she was going to be set up to teach mountain dulcimer next year at the Bellingham Folk Festival, which isn't until next January. I bet between now and then we can track her down, though. I would ask Kaylee Schmidt. That'd be my. She might know who that person is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kaylee Schmidt. Okay.
Schmidt with a D. Yeah.
With a D. The next question I have for you is, what wood do you think is best?
What wood do I think is best?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a trick question. I think my whole, some of my ideas I was trying to put forth here is that I don't necessarily think any of them are best. And that's like, when it came to that rosewood and oak guitar, it was kind of like, I don't know, but I do have things that I like to work with. I really like working with Douglas fir, just partly from being a carpenter, construction worker. I love the smell of it. I love the feel of it. I love the trees. Douglas fir is nice. And I have made guitars with Douglas fir tops. But yeah, as far as what's best, it just kind of depends on my mood.
Good answers. Okay. Where are Rosie and Oki now?
Good question. Oki is in Illinois with a friend of mine named Georgia, and Rosie is, I believe, in Eugene, Oregon, with a player down there. Both went to people who I kind of know through the old time music world. Yeah.
Very nice. So, do you use various types of wood in one guitar, or try to use all oak or all spruce, etc., in one instrument?
Generally, it's a big mix. Yeah. I do like to use walnut a lot, I guess. So maybe getting to the favorite wood, walnut has been a preferred one a lot for the last handful of years. But and so I have done stuff where I've used walnut for the back, or the back, the sides, and for the neck. But other than that, I still tend to do something different for the top, and then the fingerboard and bridge, I tend to try and use something as dense as I can, But yeah, so usually a mix.
Excellent. What glue or glues do you use for joining and laminating?
Great question. I primarily use hide glue with my building, which is it's essentially like gelatin, and I get it in dry granules, mix it with some water, and you keep it heated to a kind of a constant temperature, and then it's kind of a traditional instrument maker's glue, and you can pretty fairly easily heat it and pull it apart if you need to. Besides that, I also use Titebond, like kind of standard wood glue. And then, you use like super glue for like little bits of like inlay things or stuff like that, but yeah, hide glue is the primary one in Titebond.
Very interesting. All right, the next question. Is that a tambura hanging on the wall behind you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, who asked that? Yeah, I think, where is that thing? Yeah, yeah, I actually don't, but maybe you tell me, mystery person who asked that. I think my friend told me maybe it was like a Tanzernica or something like that, but maybe so check out these frets, right? I mean,
Wow.
just so cool. Okay, here's the headstock, 4 strings. But then the nut is kind of cut with even more slots. I got this at an antique shop down by Thorpe. This is kind of a wall hanger. It's in really rough shape. I would love to restore this at some point, but first step would be finding out exactly what it was. So whoever asked that, if anybody knows exactly what this is, a friend of mine did have a pretty good idea, but I'd like to hear it and discuss it more.
That is pretty cool. All right. Do you make inlaid abalone fretboards? Are they hard to work on?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do wood fretboards, but I do inlay like abalone and pearl and stuff like that into them. And yeah, doing inlay work is like one of those. There's all these like little kind of side line skill sets with instrument making. It's like you could do all this stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, you also have to like hand cut these like little inlays and do engraving, which is really cool. But anyway, so that's like one of those like unique side things that I'm not like spectacular at, but I do like to do inlay. And yeah, so it is difficult to cut them out and not break them. And actually inlaying stuff is like simple inlays, I don't think is too terribly difficult of a part of instrument making though. And oftentimes people will like look at a guitar and ask me if I did the inlay, and I'll be like, yeah, and they'll be like, that's amazing. And to me, I always feel like I'm like, it's amazing that this thing plays. That's the part to me that's amazing, But anyway, yeah. But yeah, if that answers the question.
Awesome. So do you prefer hot hide glue over aliphatic resin?
Yes, sort of. So aliphatic resin is Titebond or standard kind of Elmer's wood glue type of wood glue. Hot hide glue is awesome. And yeah, so for the most part, for most of my guitar builds, I use hot hide glue in certain spots. I use it to join my tops. I use it to do my neck joints, and I do it for the bridge, gluing the bridge. And then I do it for the bracing too, all the bracing on the top, and usually also on the back, and lots of other stuff because I have the glue pot going. That said, I use Titebond for a lot of things where it's more convenient. Sometimes gluing the back and the top to the sides just because it's a big glue up, and and I'll use aliphatic resin to like glue this neck joint together, these two pieces of wood, because those are things that I don't ever really want to come apart. And that said, I mean, I've taken apart guitars that were built entirely with Titebond or an aliphatic resin, and they've come apart fine. It is more work to deal with in the end, but that's a long ramble on that. But we'll say yes, I prefer hot hide glue.
Perfect. All right. How long does it take you to build a guitar from start to finish? And do you work on several at a time or one straight through?
Yeah, I almost always work on several at a time. And then there's a point where I'll just focus on one towards the completion. But I tend to overlap steps, or I'll do multiple steps on like tend to work on about 3 or 4 guitars at a time. How long it takes from start to finish is a tough thing to judge. If I were to work on just one guitar start to finish, it'd probably be about a month. Except it would be longer than that because there's waiting time with the curing the finish, but I could do the bulk of the construction probably in like 2 weeks. But then there's all the finish work, just all of a sudden everything just slows down, and then setting it up and the final stages of it tend to drag on. But yeah, so it's vague.
All right. How do you source your wood? Do you order it online or go to a lumber yard, or do you have specific wood shops for luthiers?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. I've definitely ordered some stuff online. There's great lumber yards and stuff around here and through the Northwest that I've visited. Often when I've taken road trips, like I'd stop at like those roadside places down in Oregon and like buy like hunks of myrtle or whatever. There's a great lumber yard in Portland that deals mostly with kind of like urban salvage, walnut and maple and stuff like that. Like trees are cut down kind of like within like more like in the city limits or whatever. And yeah, so I love going to places like that. Getting wood from places that aren't necessarily selling for luthiers. And then I definitely buy stuff from places that are directly selling to luthiers. That's the most expensive place to buy wood. If you're, as soon as it says tone wood, like the price goes up. But for good reason, because it has been selected. It's got the right cut. They've taken care of it, hopefully. So, when you do buy something as tone wood, you are paying a premium for something that takes out a lot of guesswork. Where if I go to a lumber yard, I might have to really think hard about it, do some odd cutting, and end up only being able to use a part of this thing that I bought. But yeah, that's stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that Rosie and Oki sounded different from each other. Any way to tangibly describe the differences in sound between them or the tones that other woods impart on instruments?
Oh, no. I mean, yeah, that's like one of those like long running jokes. Just, I mean, it's so hard to describe sound, and luthiers and instrument dealers have all these, there's a whole glossary of terms we use to describe wood. This has this chocolatey overtone, and it's very rich and bright, and you can really, it's very woody, very, very resonant, dry, and all these things we say. And it's like, what I think of when I say it sounds woody means something different than what you might think of. And there might be some consensus to some of these terms and ideas, but it's hard to say. So describing the stuff, like I try not to do it too much. I try and let the stuff describe itself. Between Rosie and Oki, I mean, the fundamental sound was very, very similar. Volume wise, they seem to be like the same. I mean, I wasn't measuring anything scientifically, but or with measuring tools other than the ear. But yeah, everything sounded roughly the same. There's just, I don't know how to put it.
This next one's just a comment. Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I never have known anything about building instruments. This has been very informative.
Thanks.
And let's see. Do you have a personal sound preference towards acoustic guitars made from a particular combination of tone woods? For example, mahogany B&S with a Sitka top.
Again, I don't know. I mean, I guess no is like the short answer, but sometimes maybe I think I do, but then maybe that changes. For example, right now, the guitar I'm playing most often lately is an all mahogany guitar, mahogany top. It's an old Guild, and I just like playing that one a lot. It feels right. It sounds nice. As far as I guess I have things that I prefer to work on sometimes. Like I said, I really like working with walnut lately, and the instruments I made with it sound awesome, I think. So I'm like, maybe there's something magic to that wood combination, or maybe it's just, it's hard to say. Besides the wood selection, there's so many factors, again. Yeah, it's a great question though. This is stuff that I think about often.
All right. Do you play your own guitars when you're performing? What guitars do you like to play?
I don't play my own guitars. I've actually never really kept my own guitars, so I just so I don't perform with them. The guitars I like to play, I do like my own, and I would like to keep one of mine, but it's like, gotta make a living, and also there's people waiting because they've been asking me it. So I don't know. I just like playing whatever I'm inspired by at the moment.
Do different cuts of the same tree sound different, or do cuts of the same tree generally sound the same? Or do cuts of the same type of tree generally sound the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's something, it's an important distinction, because they can sound very different. Like when people say, I love the sound, like for example, the question a couple questions back of like, is there a certain wood combination you like? For example, do you like mahogany and Sitka spruce? Well, it's like, it depends on which piece of mahogany or which piece of Sitka spruce, because between 2 pieces or 10 pieces, they can all sound very different and have different attributes. One piece can be really heavy for whatever reason, or flexible in a way, and all of them could be potentially still very viable, good pieces to use. What somebody would say, oh, this would make a good guitar, but they could still sound and feel very different. So that's a great question, because that's such a thing. When people say, I love the sound of a mahogany guitar, it's like, well, there's a lot of mahogany out there. I don't know, it doesn't all sound the same.
Is it possible to adjust the sound of a guitar once it's starting to come together in the building process?
Yeah, I'd say so. But I don't do a lot of that but as you're going the building process, the bracing I was showing on the inside, like, the down in here, there's all the structure, the framework that you could potentially carve away or add something, or the bridge, you could, if something sound different, you could swap the bridge out. That's like something. It's like, how heavy is the bridge? Maybe that has a big factor on the sound. Certainly it would have a factor. So yeah, there are definitely things you could change to change the sound, but I think once it's like all the way built and strung up, without like really opening it up and like rebracing it or something, I think you have like a pretty strong fundamental sound character of it, I think. I don't know.
All right, it looks like we have 2 questions left. How does the hourglass shape of the guitar affect the sound?
Oh, I don't know. I think part of the shape is just function for, sits nicely on your knee, kind of sits there. That's a great question. In general, you have this lower area I tend to think of as being the part that's really the juice. That's where the sound's really, the motion's happening, the sound's happening. Up here, you've got the neck and you've got the fingerboard glued down. You've got like bigger, heavier braces up here. You don't really necessarily want this area moving a whole lot. You could design a guitar where this is also very resonant, but in general, this tends to be more rigid up here, and you got the sound hole here. So it's kind of this area down here where it's really happening, which is almost, not quite, but kind of circular-ish. I don't know if that answers the question. A lot of these questions, I think, are questions that don't have answers, which are my favorite kind of questions.
And finally, do you like to make electric guitars, and are they as satisfying to make as acoustic?
I have only made 3 electric guitars. But yes, I like to make them for sure. I don't know if they're if I made one right now, it'd be super satisfying because I don't make them that often. So I don't know. But yeah, I play electric guitar and I work on them a lot. I do a lot of repair work on them. And yeah, I'll say yes, they're equally satisfying.
Nice. And one more question here that just snuck in, we can get in. Who are some luthiers that inspire you?
Oh, also great question. Todd Cambio is the guy who I studied with, and he's out of Madison, Wisconsin. His guitars are called Fraulini guitars. I love his building. He's taught me a great deal, and I always look to him for inspiration, just not just in his guitars that he makes, but just in his work ethic and his just general approach is awesome. And I don't know, there's a lot of, gosh, that's a great question, but I'm trying to blank of other people right now. But I've been inspired. There's some repair people who like I follow, like their social media stuff and whatever. And who I've met. Kerry Char is a great repair guy down in Portland, and I always really like looking at his stuff because he's just always got really interesting projects, and I get inspired.
Wonderful. Well, it looks like we've come to the end of our time tonight, and this has been absolutely wonderful. I'm wondering, would you like to play us out for a few minutes?
I'd be happy to. That's right. We talked about this. All right. Thanks everybody for coming out. I'm gonna grab my guitar here, play a little instrumental ditty, and just want to say, just want to express my gratitude. Thanks for spending this time with me and being here. Thanks to the Whatcom County Library System for hosting this, and thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, Ann, for setting this up. And okay, here's just a little ditty. Thanks, everybody. Let's see what we can do here. I'll do this one. Thanks everybody so much. I'll see you out in the world. Bye-bye.